Okay, so the Bayt Bin Ati at Dharmaki is located to the south of Qattara Oasis, just opposite from Jimmy Oasis. I think it needs to be put briefly into its historic context. We can see that it is some way to the south of the well-known Iron Age village of Ramallah, to the south too of Healy, where a very famous series of Iron Age archaeological sites have been found. Perhaps less well-known are the results of Serge Clouzot's survey, which identified a whole series of sites here, which also belong to the Iron Age. We then did some survey work down in Barami, and we found this continuation, really, of these sites way down here. So that we can say, actually, that the Bayt Bin Ati is very much part of quite an extensive Iron Age landscape. And I think that helps us understand some of the features which I'm going to be discussing in this presentation. The archaeology of Bayt Bin Ati was discovered in the course of the adaptive reuse of a extensively rebuilt, completely rebuilt, late Islamic mud brick tower house. In actual fact, we've got two late Islamic tower houses which were kind of knocked together to create this kind of chimera of monumental mud brick. But underneath that, we found a whole series of archaeological layers. And what I want to do today really is just to briefly run through this Iron Age sequence before handing over to Anne Benoit, who will take you through the results of the Iron Age pottery which we discovered. So I should say really that the two areas of excavation which we're going to be looking at is this area known as the workshop, where I think many of you went to visit yesterday. And then down here as well, we have the energy center. This area has been preserved in situ. Down here, this area we have preservation by record, effectively. The whole area was removed and the energy center located on top. So the most complete stratigraphic sequence was found in the area of the workshop. We have about 5 meters of stratigraphy stretching from the late Islamic tower house down to these rock-cut tanks, of which I will come back to. The energy center out here we'll also discuss in a moment. The sequence of Bin Ati can be divided into 3 main groups, these upper, medial, and lower horizons. The lower horizons are really dating to the Iron Age 2. We have a dense series of negative features, cutting features, of both industrial and agricultural activity. The medial horizons date to the Iron Age 3 and the late pre-Islamic, also into the early Islamic and perhaps also the Middle Islamic. But really there's no features, it's just finds in many ways. And then finally, we have another intensive occupation of the site in these upper horizons, which are associated with the late Islamic period. The earliest evidence on site was found in the energy center, which is just to the south of the workshop. You can see the workshop just here. We're coming through to the south. These are the kind of the lower, at the very top of the lower horizons, with the medial horizons of the mound formation above, and then the late Islamic tower house in the upper horizons at the top. So to begin at the beginning, we have a number of really quite ephemeral gullies, these sort of curvilinear, shallow features. We didn't really have enough area exposed in plan to be able to fully understand these features, but I think it's fair to say that there's some sort of agricultural irrigation ditch. These go out of use, are replaced by a series of, tree pits connected by channels and fed by a well. The well, we dug it was about 4 meters deep. It was filled with water at the time, we had to pump it out. And at the bottom of it, we found 2 complete Iron Age 2 vessels, including this rather nice bridge-spouted vessel down here. This phase of the field system went out of use and was replaced by a phallage. We can tell this, the stratigraphic relationship's quite clear. This feature cuts through all of the earlier features. In some sense, then, you could almost talk about the intensification of agricultural activity, where you've gone from well-watered tree pits to a more kind of, I suppose, technical aspects of irrigation. The field system was abandoned and went out of use, and there's a major change of land use when we get the cutting of the kind of the horizontal stratigraphy by this very large rock. Well, it's a very large basin. It goes down about 1.5 meters, goes up about 15 meters by 10. And this whole area was excavated to reveal an open area of impermeable bedrock into which were cut a series of squarish tanks connected by shallow concave channels and fed by a well at the top of a gentle slope. And this arrangement seemed to us to be industrial, in effect. We have a series of perhaps flotation tanks or settlement tanks or something like this, and although we weren't entirely sure what was going on, and there's no sediments, unfortunately, these tanks were just filled by, is it going to go back? Yeah. These tanks were just filled by sand, they've been kept clean. We thought that maybe these tanks were to do with dyeing or tanning or maybe some sort of metallurgical process. It's very interesting today to see the latest results from Suruq al-Hadid, and some of the features there, I think, are really quite reminiscent of what we're finding here in al-Ain at Bin Ati. The rock-cut tanks were preserved in situ. We were able to persuade the planners and the architects that this would add value to the site, and we preserved them so that they could be part of a basement exhibition, which I think many of you went to see last night. The basin was reused after the industrial installation went out of use, and a series of tree pits were installed. These were fed by a well at the top here, you can see. And really, if we're dealing with the intensive cultivation of trees, potentially palms, in a sunken basin, we're moving towards something which very strongly resembles the late Islamic oases which you see in the present day. These circular features, I think, these kind of donut-shaped, you can see, with a sort of central area in the center where you have the tree pits surrounded by, I suppose, a sort of irrigation basin where you'd pour water in and it would sort of hold the water. Same thing here, actually. You can see the kind of similar features being used today to hold water. Each one was filled with this very nice, rich, dark silt mixed with charcoal and kind of nice cultivation material, really. The size of the tree pits is interesting. They're about 1.20 meters, maybe 1.40 meters. When we first excavated it, I was hesitant about them being root bowls for palm trees, but potentially, actually, they could hold palm trees. We took environmental samples. We're looking forward to getting the results back, and that should be able to establish what was being grown here. After this last phase of intensive irrigation activity, the basin slowly fills up, and there's a whole series of cut features which we can see in the section here. And these cut features are, in many times, they're quite ephemeral. I mean, this is one of the larger ones coming through here, but you can see others here, just these little pits. Quite difficult to interpret. Not entirely sure what's going on. It could be to do with industry, could be to do with agriculture. Really, there was no conclusive evidence to suggest or confirm function. At the very end of the Iron Age 2 occupation, we have evidence for copper processing. We have slag and an ingot and some crucible fragments. Unfortunately, these are not in a primary context. This is a dump. This has all been kind of bundled up and dumped somewhere. And so unfortunately, it's difficult really to see how this fits in with the rest of the site. Immediately after this dump of slag was deposited, we have really a major change in the landscape with the deposition of these very thick layers of redeposited natural gravels, which I think are indicative of some sort of an upcast. This is digging of some sort of large negative feature of uncertain purpose nearby the site. And this large band of upcast gravels is then covered by very thick layers of windblown sand, which really take up the rest of the medial layers, where we find no evidence for I suppose, on-site intensive activity. We find pottery, but we don't find features. And that really brings the Iron Age to a close at this site. We were able to put the stratigraphy together. There are 45 phases spanning possibly the early Iron Age right the way up to the late Islamic. And you can see, I think, that here, of these 45, about 22 are dated to the early and Iron Age 2 period. So almost half the site, in terms of the activity, is from the Iron Age. And that really is where I introduce Anne Benoit, who will take over and tell you much more about the pottery and the finds from these Iron Age strata.